Afternoon all. The video a few videos ago about the main line is still kind of interesting for me to talk about, I think. I've just found a definition here on Wiki for what mainline is. So basically my Wiki definition, which you can see here, is that I found the principal, most important or most often played variation of an opening or piece of analysis, and it gives here the main line of the King's Engine actually with bishop e2 e5. That's referred to as like the main line of the King's Engine. Okay, now in the Caro Kann I made the claim that actually this is what I think is the main line statistically, not knight f6 but bishop f5. And I followed that through a bit. Okay, but Bronstein actually has his own named variation in the Caro Kann, which begins with knight f6 here instead of bishop f5. So it's off that mainline path, and it was pretty powerful back in 1965. His opponent Nikolay Bakulin, when he played this line, which is now actually called Bronstein-Larsen Variation. So Larsen, named after Bent Larsen, who was also very innovative in the opening, often playing things like 1 b3 as white. So both these players, you know, why are they sidestepping from the main lines? I believe this idea that they're trying for these potentially winning trump cards is the key thing. And it's these trump cards which are kind of vehicles, convenient vehicles, planning vehicles for middle game, and if there's going to be an endgame even. But here it's clearly about the middle game in particular that I think this variation has a lot of power and potential. Because after knight takes f6, he plays actually g takes f6, and it's funny that he also plays gf6 in like the Bern variation of the French, which I enjoy playing. So there's immediate dynamism. It's not really a gambit in the material sense, but it's structurally a gambit that the double pawns provide dynamic compensation though for the G file. And this game I think is quite a vivid illustration that if white's not playing correctly to try and squash this dynamism, that there could be real problems for the white player. Now I think nowadays effective methods are being discovered based on like c3 as a move to try and blunt the bishop later if the bishop's going to go there, and then g3 to try and blunt the g file pressure. But even so, we've seen a recent Nigel Short game in this line where, you know, he managed to win with black, getting double pawns even on the queen's side. So the dynamism here is without being a gambit, and in fact I had listed this variation in one of my thematic tournaments, which is recurringly set up on chessworld.net. If you visit the thematic tournaments on my correspondence site, there's a variety of gambits which are recurringly set up, but also this variation is there if you want to play from this start position. So his opponent Nikolay in the USR Championship 1965 played actually bishop e3, and I'm not sure he knew what was going to hit him now. So bishop f5, and he played queen d2. Maybe, you know, there's a little bit of improvisation already. You know, what is really queen d2 doing? Is white really going to play bishop h6 later? Well, actually, okay, e6 is played here. After knight e2, we have knight d7, and now white played to try and attack the bishop. Bishop just retreated to g6. So I think here, you know, black's position looks okay, and there's potential dynamic play on the g file, which white actually seemed to underestimate. He let David Bronstein actually castle on the opposite side of the board here, and he let him attack him now after castling with h5. So I think the immediate trump card here is being used because black's going to castle queenside and try and intensify the pressure on the g file. So there's a good convenient middle game plan. So far it's sort of this case that you know, what do you want to get out of the openings? Do you want to play the opening for the sake of playing a popular opening, or have you got a specific idea in mind in the form of potentially favourable trump cards, which, you know, potentially favourable imbalances? So here rook fd1, and now the knight is chased back, and now h3 actually, which seems to be blocking the position, but it is, you know, if white plays g3 as he did, but it's creating some potential, you know, light square weaknesses to exploit, and there's still a secondary battering ram now possible for black potentially on g3 in any case. So David now castled queenside, and after c4 he wants to make sure actually d5 isn't a really crushing thematic break, especially if it's going to you know, increase the scope of a lot of white pieces here. So actually c5 allowing d5 under slightly more favourable condition now, that it can be, you know, e5 could be played in response to it. So d5 now, and now e5. So not minding the potential for d6, maybe that pawn could be rounded up, and queen c6 actually would immediately threaten mate anyway. So that echoes some issues already around the light squares around the opponent's king. In fact, let's just check that that idea that d6 is nothing here. I think queen c6, and that's fine. Okay, this is about equals, even slightly better according to Ripquist. Queen d5 is one of the main moves. Okay, so basically d5 isn't the major issue in this game. After rook ac1, now the battering ram effect, using that trump card, the g file, kind of logically, and the tactics should follow on from that. That once you know, the king's safety, the king literally is targeted like an old you know, castled king in a real life war or battle. There's a battering ram now. So f4. Try and open up lines against the white king. Now rook de8. I mean, the games look to be made, you know, quite simple actually, but you know, this is great stuff, because now there's an idea of like e4, e3 even. After king h8, now rook hg8. So there's a lot of dynamic pressure on white here. Now, so if you consider your own, you know, treatment, if you ever play the Caro Kann, and you might be playing bishop f5, you know, wouldn't you say this is a great position to have with black? Great attacking prospects, great pressure, and the double pawns, as I say, you know, that's kind of a gambit in its own right, a structural gambit rather than a material-based gambit. So the investment is pawn structure, but the return is like g-file pressure and potential play in the centre as well. And you know, a double battering ram on g3 is made possible if needed. So here, actually, after e4, black's clearly extending the scope of all his pieces as well. Bishop c5 was played. So after knight takes, queen takes c5, black still stands better now. And we see now bishop c7. I think this has the zigzag threat, bishop b6 and queen g1 with threatening mates on g1 rather embarrassingly. So there are some real concrete issues with white's king safety, even though apparently, you know, it seems to be blocked up here. But this fawn pawn is very dangerous, this pawn on h3. So we have e takes f4 and now e3. And it's clear that, you know, look at black's pieces, they're wonderful now, and it's actually white with such a terrible pawn structure all over the place. So his king safety is being shot to pieces, and now David finishes brilliant. Now he plays a brilliant bishop decoy. He plays bishop d3. Okay, and you might wonder what the reason is. I'll let you work out now what happens now. So 10 seconds here. Black to play. So how do you exploit your trump card from the opening? That's the question. That I like to phrase it in that way. Just to emphasise, this is all really from the opening. The seeds of the tactics were planted earlier. So I think I might have given too much of a visual clue here actually. So 5 seconds starting from now for the next move. Okay, yes, a rook g1 check. So putting the king on that square to allow a discover the attack now with e2 check. So the knight goes in the way, and David just plays rook takes e3. So now white plays this check, but it's answered by a very good move, which I hope you can spot. 5 seconds. Yep. rook e6 check again, discovered check. After king h1, the final move of the game, I wonder if you can spot it. Very, very logical culmination of the trump card strategy from the opening. Okay, queen f2. And white felt compelled to resign. It's actually a forced mate here. Let's turn on an engine and just look at the variation. So if queen takes, there's queen takes e1, queen f1, queening. Well, it's all over here really. This is just all over. But I'm just showing a forced mate sequence. So you know, there's two principal threats here. Queen g2 mate and queen takes e1 is mating as well. Okay. So basically, you know, it's a neat game, and it's the Bronstein-Larsen variation, which actually has its own ECO code, B16. So David Bronstein was behind a lot of opening innovations and trends. So trends are like popularity surges, and in the 50s and 60s there was a popularity surge of this particular variation. I think it was also popular around 1910 as well. But it was like the resurgence. And, you know, it's still played nowadays, as we saw from the recent Nigel Short game. But I think this is a good example of a structural type gambit, gaining the imbalances in terms of G-file pressure and greater rook activity. But you've got to watch out for white structural breaks to really mash up and fragment the black pawn structure. But they seem to be handled quite well here. But white's handling of the dynamism, you know, it's been refined nowadays. So you often get c3, knight f3, g3 played, but in this game it seems the dynamism, how it was handled, was kind of not the greatest, because this knight was a tempo gaining target, and even though, you know, white seems shielded later on the g file, this dangerous pawn on h3 means that, you know, black's got the upper hand really, and just needs to use like a battering ram effect to try and further damage white's king safety. So we saw this f5, the start of the battering ram, and not minding about d6 because queen c6, that pawn comes in handy, coordinating on g2. So b4, you know, white tried to expose the black the black king on the queen side, but it's all about timing as well now, and black's attack is really crashing through first. White's attack really is not really getting anywhere. These pieces are kind of spectators a little bit, which is always a bit of a problem when faced with a vicious attack. So have pieces like laying around on the first rank like this, rather passively. So bishop c7, nifty threat of rerouting the bishop there to threaten queen g1 mate. And now we have this lovely idea, basically, of two decoys in a row. So from this position, which seems initially blocked, how is he going to proceed here? He just opens up the scope here for a discovered check with bishop d3. So this is beautiful stuff. Bishop d3, and then this rook g1 check. So he gets his discovered check in here. Now let's actually just see if the king had moved to h1, what would be the killing move here. Well, actually there's a mate in 6, believe it or not. The killing move, even though black's better with a few other moves, even e takes or bishop b6, but the killing move clinically is queen f2, threatening queen g2 mate. So here, check is not really helping. Let's follow this check line to take on h3. See here, there's a mate in 4 where the g file really comes into its own as a killing trump card because of rook g8. It just shows really, look, if you use the opening as a tool to give your pieces scope, then obviously that scope will breed, you know, tactical combinations which could be favourable to you. So the g file here is really crushing. It doesn't matter that black hasn't played the main line of the Caro Kann. He got his trump card of the g file, and the variations now support that. Here, if knight g3, then, you know, queen takes, and this is all over really. There's queen f1 mate here now because of that pin on the knight. So if there wasn't a queen f5 check, say something else. Well, there's nothing much else, because otherwise Queen G2. So if Rook E2, then there's Queen takes F1 mate. So it's a fairly hopeless position, this position here. So Knight E3 was chosen, but just Rook takes E3, and again similar threats emerging. So quite kind of vicious, with that fawn pawn on H3 being kind of crushing. Okay, I hope you enjoyed that game, and it's another demo that really, this is the Bronstein-Larsen variation of the Caro Kann, so not the main line, named after Bronstein himself. So while on the subject of Bronstein, it's very interesting actually to tackle, I believe, this question of main lines, because between Bronstein and Larsen, Larsen, these were two of like the strongest players in their eras, and they were creative, so creative in the opening phase of the game. So Knight F6, and with the GF idea. There's also EF as an alternative, which is actually a little bit less popular according to chessgames.com database. So the most popular move is actually Bishop F5, keeping the structure intact with no kind of sacrifice involved, and black accepts a slightly more cramped but more solid game with potential for a later C5 break, often in the main line, which I discussed in an earlier video. But yeah, Knight F6, if you've never experimented with this might be a good experiment for your blitz chess. If you've got these ideas in mind for the later middle game to castle queen side, I think it adds a lot of spice to your game. This is like an interesting recipe which will take your opponents off guard, give you this G-file, potentially winning trump card, as long as your counterplay is kept alive and you don't get smashed with a D5 break. It's really demonstrating, scope of the pieces is everything, and king safety especially decides the game. So Bishop D3, marking and celebrating all the trump cards set up earlier in the opening. Beautiful combination to finish, and Queen F2, completely decisive. Comments or questions on YouTube? Thanks very much.